All right, well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining me on this webinar on a subject of great interest to me. In fact, several of my books are on this subject. Extending lean thinking to office and services. Just a little background on myself. I kind of grew up in General Electric in the 1980s, graduated from a corporate management program that they had, left GE in 1990 to form Change Management Associates, and have since worked with all kinds of organizations in a wide variety of industries, including manufacturing and services, financial services, healthcare, and so on. Author of 4 books, 2 of which have won the Shingo Prize, if you're familiar with that. And finally, I am a Lean Enterprise Institute faculty member since 2001. If you're not familiar with LEI, that is the not-for-profit organization of Jim Womack, who is a co-author of Lean Thinking. So in the hour that we have together, not a lot of time, but we do want to cover these topics. Just talk about what makes office and service different, and then the key concepts of Lean: organizing by value stream, standard or standardized work, visual management, creating flow, and creating level pull. I'm going to go over each of these concepts and drill down a bit with them in the time that we have available, and then there'll be time at the end for question and answer. So these are some of the arguments I hear of why Lean does not apply in office and service. Pretty classic. Nothing is the same. Everything is different. Demand is unpredictable. I don't know what I need to do today until it shows up, the work shows up. The work tends to be less tangible. In office environments, it tends to be electronic form. And there are many disruptions and interruptions to the work environment. So basically what people are saying is a highly variable work environment. But I would counter that and say, well, much of that is self-created. We kind of allow that in our policies and practices and processes, allow or kind of generate some of this variability. I would also argue that these circumstances, these conditions really scream for the application of lean thinking. So what do I mean by that? We have a highly variable work environment that can be created by a lack of standard work. We have standard work in manufacturing. Over the years, people have accepted it. But when I work in office and in some service environments, there's a sad lack of standard work. And it's just sort of accepted that people will find their own way of doing things. I think that's changing as the years go by, but it's still pretty prevalent. I also find that there's insufficient planning and coordination of activities in office and service environments. In manufacturing, we have schedules that people tend to follow. Same thing maybe in distribution centers. But in office and service environments, it's often people do make their own priorities, or who screams the loudest. It's a very common response that I get when I ask, how do you know what to do next? And these are symptoms of a lack of sufficient planning and coordination. People may not recognize it, but there's a lot of batch processing that goes on in offices and in some service environments as well. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But they don't really see what they do as a batch, because it's not like in manufacturing where I set up a machine and I run 1,000 pieces. In office and service environments, it's the frequency that we perform an activity, particularly in a multitasking environment. So if I do a task once a week, my batch size is a week. If I do a task once a day, my batch size is a day. Sometimes batch processing is dictated by the computer systems that many organizations are dependent on, where they run programs overnight and then information is available for someone else or the next person in the process. So when we talk about batch processing, it's not something that people readily recognize what they're doing as such in an office and service environment. There tends to be a lot of handoffs. The underlying structure of a process with lots of handoffs tends to increase the complexity and lends itself to greater variation. And we start challenging that. Why the handoffs? And there's usually some underlying assumptions of certain departments and certain people within departments can do certain tasks. And that, in turn, often creates a lot of handoffs. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later when we talk about continuous flow. And then there's a little application of visual management, which can contribute to this highly variable nature too, because people are just not aware of really what's going on, and they kind of feel unsettled by that. So we'll talk quite a bit today about visual management. I'm sure there's other causes of this highly variable nature that is not on my list, but these are probably the 5 most common ones that I've encountered in my work with organizations. So the first main concept of lean is value stream management, or organizing by value stream. I will say that there's a lot of tools of lean, and I'm not going to cover that today. We really don't have time for that. But these are, what I'm going to cover are the key underlying concepts of lean. Some people are referring to this organizing by value stream as organizing horizontally rather than vertically. So just to compare and contrast, a traditional organizational structure tends to be organized by function or department. And there's really little relationship to process and the information process, even the service process, that tends to cut across those departments and functions. And what ends up happening in turn, flow is impeded, and it does give rise to more and more handoffs. There also tends to be what I would call parochialism, these functional silos, turf battles, turf rejection, turf protection, and all of that can definitely give rise to a conflict of prioritization of priorities. As different departments are held accountable for different measures. This can all be, kind of magnified with budgetary processes that you might be able to relate to. But what ends up happening is no one's looking at the overall whole. They're just looking at their little part of it, and that can create some issues with flow. So organizing by value stream is kind of turning those functional silos, those functional smokestacks, if you will, and turn them 90 degrees to be horizontal. So start thinking about systems, and as a quality, most of you, I'm sure, with the quality group ASQ, for full disclosure, I'm a Demingite from the 80s. And Dr. Deming always taught about system thinking. And today we might kind of rephrase that to lean terminology to call it value stream thinking. So, for example, if a person that's maybe managing a customer service department says to me, hey, come on in and help us with customer service, maybe value stream map our processes. If you're not familiar with value stream mapping, that's an assessment and planning tool of lean practitioners. I usually respond to that request and say, well, what processes do we really want to look at? What systems do we really want to look at? And odds are those processes and systems are going to cut across well beyond the customer service department. So instead of just looking at order processing, we might look at the entire order-to-cash process, which includes fulfillment, includes shipping, invoicing, and receiving payment on the invoicing for our goods and services. If I get a similar call from, say, someone involved in purchasing, I'll kind of expand that discussion to what I would call the requisition to pay value stream, which again would cut across multiple functions and departments, starting all the way back to where we identify the need to buy something, and then buying it, receiving it, storing it if we store it, and then paying it, paying the supplier for it. And if you think of these order to cash, requisition to pay, product and process development, for human resource, what I call the people value stream, I call it the hire to retire value stream. What this does is it helps people start looking at the overall system And that's an extremely important part, not just with Lean, but as I said, what Dr. Deming taught us many, many years ago. People need to have a system view. They need to understand the changes that they make in their part of the system, how that affects up and down the system, up and down the value stream. So we do not suboptimize, where we make well-intended changes in one area and have a negative impact on another. Now, what we initially are trying to do is get value stream awareness, and then perhaps actually organize by value stream, which would mean changing our organizational structure, which of course would generate a lot of anxiety in most organizations. But I often say to people, you don't have to organize by value stream necessarily to improve flow and get breakthrough results. At the very least, we have to think in value streams, and then as we redesign, we have to redesign the overall system, or what today people are calling value streams. You've got to get the right people involved up and down the stream in our redesign and improvement efforts. So at least getting people thinking this way is a necessary first step. Whether we ever organize fully, again, changing the organizational structure, that's another discussion. I do have various smaller companies and mid-sized companies that have organized by value stream, but I've only had maybe one that I've worked with, a large publicly traded company that actually changed how they were, their traditional functional organizational structure. But I don't want anyone to think that that's the only option. There are actually three options. We could have cross-functional, interdepartmental, co-located teams based on value stream, even maintaining the same organizational relationships and reporting relationships. Sometimes the nature of the cross-functional value stream lends itself to this, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes what we will do is take a department and look at the various processes that the folks are involved in and organize within the department the various roles. So instead of me trying to do 5 activities today, I might be designated for one activity. And then someone else would cover, or other people would cover the others. And this tries to basically take this, I use an analogy of a bowl of spaghetti noodles that are all kind of intertwined, and trying to lay those noodles out all straight in an organized way. So by redefining roles, kind of challenging the multitasking environment to some degree, we feel we can better organize ourselves and promote flow. Without changing the organizational structure, just doing it within our department. And those roles aren't cast in stone. We may rotate people through to different roles to keep it interesting, keep their skills up, maintain our flexibility, and so forth. Now, where this can't work is when it's a department of one. And I do work in small organizations where there is just one. And then what we're talking about there is just organizing their activities for those particular individuals by value stream, kind of laying out a plan for those activities through the day or the week or the month. And that has provided those individuals and the organization overall with some important benefits. This does, I will admit, represents batching, because you're trying to, again, not do 10 things at once, which just doesn't go very well. But those are the 3 alternatives I've kind of come across in my work over the years. There may be others I have not encountered or considered, but these are the 3 that I find most useful. Standard, or some people use the term standardized work, is a foundation concept of Lean, and really if you think about it, of any good quality management system. It's seeking to reduce variability in the output, a product, a service, information, and also the performance of a process. I have found that there's a tremendous misunderstanding what standardized work is, particularly in ISO certified companies or organizations. Standardized work is not the detailed what I would call standard operating procedures, or SOPs, or what you would typically find in an ISO quality management system documentation, very detailed. Standard work instructions are kind of the cliff notes to that. So they're not replacements, they're to be used in conjunction. SOPs, very detailed SOPs, have their place, training of brand new people. But then after that, we need something else, something that sort of keeps the person following what they need, what they learned, you know. And that's not the very detailed procedure that is in a binder or even electronic folder somewhere that rarely gets referred to. We need something else, kind of the cliff notes. Think of a 1, maybe 2-page summary of the key points, and that's a deliberate term in standardized work, in the terminology. The key points of that process and how I'm supposed to go about doing it. Get a lot of resistance to standardized work, and people see it as you're trying to make them robots. And actually, we can increase our flexibility with standardized work because people can rotate and move into where needed, look at this quick reference, something they've already been trained on in the past. Right? Again, we're not bringing people walking in off the street cold. I don't think we ever would do that. So it actually, having the standard work instruction increases flexibility. It doesn't actually make us less flexible and robotic. It actually makes very what we call non-standard conditions. It's a very key concept of lean in general. So let's talk about non-standard conditions. I don't perform an activity that I'm supposed to or expected to perform. I would like to know that sooner than later, and having standardized work in a visible way would allow me to recognize that nearly immediately. Failure to perform an activity at a required point in time. Very often, people forget a key point of when, the timing of activities over time, and the next thing you know, they kind of do it when they get around to it or what's convenient for them, and they lose sight of why it was important to do an activity at a particular point in time, and it could be having negative impact on others in the value stream. Another example, and this is not a complete list by any means, another example of a non-standard condition is it's taking longer than it should to perform this activity. We would want to know that. If it's taking longer or shorter, for that matter, we would want to know that. And we would want the folks performing the work to identify that. Maybe something, if it's taking longer, something unforeseen has crept into our process, and we would like to know that. If it's taking shorter than it's expected of me to do an activity, maybe I'm taking shortcuts, and we would like to know that as well. And that kind of leads to the next example. Maybe I'm performing an activity in a way that's easier for me, but it's having a negative impact on some downstream process. So you think about, again, the analogy of a cliff note, a brief summary, 1, maybe 2 pages. We have to think about what are the key points, not all the step-by-step instruction. We have that in our standard operating procedure that we use on occasion. But this is something that reminds me of how to perform, and when I'm not following it, these key points, not following the key points, it typically represents a non-standard condition, which could generate a corrective cycle or an improvement cycle, both of which are good things. So we're going to put a little more detail to this. It's groupings of specific products. It's not, you know, turn computer on, go to screen 5. It is enter order. And then we would get into the details only when it rises to the level of what we call a key point. That's the how. And for every how, there should be a why. This is a reminder of why I have to do it this way. And a key point typically is quality, efficiency, and safety. And safety certainly can be important in many service environments and some office environments as well. And there should be the time and the timing, so I can see when it's taking longer than it should, or I'm taking shortcuts and it's going quicker than it should. It is not easy. It takes some skill to develop standardized work and a little practice, But when we do get it down to, again, 1 or 2 pages, we can visually display it. And then it becomes a constant reminder to me, particularly for people that are multitasking and they haven't done a task in a while. Standardized work really has a benefit for people that do things periodically, activities periodically or even infrequently. So here's a little example of one. It actually represents on the left-hand side 4 or 5 different people there. So in this example, they're combining it all. And there's key points, there's time and timing. On the right, I just added in, people often say, well, how can you get this to 1 page? And we say, well, picture's worth 1,000 words. We can add some sort of graphic. So the graphics on the right is not really for this example. I just kind of pasted those in as a talking point. There are benefits to all the concepts, key concepts, and standardized work is one of them. It can actually reduce learning curves by up to 75%. In particular, if we couple this with another lean concept that we will not talk about today called JI, or job instruction, a proven 70-year proven methodology of teaching. There are productivity or efficiency improvements because we're not just going to document what people are doing. We're going to take an advantage of this opportunity to really look at what people do when we create it and streamline it. And I think that sends a very important message that standardized work is something that helps us rather than something that's being done to us. And when we do streamline it, working with the folks that perform the work, we typically can see anywhere from a 10 to 25% productivity improvement. So it's helpful for people. And of course, with the key points, it should help with customer service and satisfaction. And I'm using customer from an internal and external standpoint. And you get a lot of pushback, in particular with those that are in quote-unquote creative processes like design or marketing, and the reality is that it does apply in those areas to a large percentage of what those people do. So that's standardized work. And another underlying concept of lean is visual management. We apply it in everything we do, like we just discussed with with standardized work, but we apply it everywhere. And people will often push back on this concept. And, you know, it's interesting to me. We humans are visual creatures. We have expressions in our language that convey this. A picture's worth 1,000 words. I used that a moment ago. Seeing is believing. Let me paint you a picture. If you're asking someone for directions to a destination, you often ask for, or maybe they provide landmarks, something visual. So knowing that humans are visual creatures, why would they resist this? So I'll allow you to ponder that a bit, and I'm going to talk a little bit more of what this is, and then maybe that'll help understand why people would resist visual management. Many organizations proudly show me what they're doing with visual management, and all it is a series of charts up on a wall showing how we did last week, last month, last quarter, last year. That is a very small piece of visual management. And these questions are what I use to design more comprehensive visual management systems that we can use day to day, hour to hour even more frequent in some environments to truly manage our workplace. So the first is, what is the purpose or function of the area, and what activities are performed in that area? So all we're talking here is giving people purpose. You know, and many organizations do a good job at this. They have mission and vision statements, maybe quality statements posted visibly. Those are important things, and organizations should do that. They should be referred to, and maybe we don't refer to them as often as we should. And what activities are performed in the area. I should be able to walk into any area and know what goes on there and what they do, and you know, not just the purpose, but the activities. So some people could argue this doesn't have great benefit to people, and I would say there's some truth to that. But humans do need purpose. They need a reminder of what the purpose is. So I would say that it might not be a frequent benefit that we use, but it's an important one. Also, Ocean, and getting that visibly posted for periodic reference is part of this. Unfortunately, many organizations that do strategic planning or policy deployment, whatever term you use, those end up in PowerPoint presentations, electronically filed, and we don't really share them and refer to them as often as we should. So that's all part of those first two questions. Next question, how do people know what to do? Now that's the scheduling of work, the triggering of work. As I said before, not always is our activities planned and coordinated as well as they should be in office and service environments. So that's where we would answer this question. How they know how to do it, that's the standardized work we just referred to, getting that visible. How they know how they are doing, there we start talking about the metrics that I referred to, which are common, though maybe not so much rear view mirror metrics, maybe more in the moment metrics so we can make more timely decisions to maintain service and flow and et cetera, and quality. And then if we're not meeting expectations, those non-standard conditions, what are we going to do about it? So here we want to make problems, or non-standard conditions, or opportunities very visible. And the process of responding to them, we want to make those very visible. Because again, those could represent improvement opportunities and should trigger an improvement cycle.
Drew, we've got a question.
An example.
I was going to say we have a question.
Go ahead.
We have a question from Tony. Tony, if you want to go ahead and ask it.
Yeah, please, Drew. Thanks for taking us through the theory, but I would really be interested in knowing of an example of visual management in a process, in a workflow in the office. This is something I struggle with in our own experience, using visual management.
I'm having difficulty hearing you, Tony. Can you, I don't know if I can increase the volume.
Okay.
Can you repeat it a little bit again?
Sure. I hope you can hear me better. I would like to know of an example where, for example, we see visual management through the process steps in an office. That would be helpful for me to translate the theory into practical application.
Well, I'm going to show a couple of examples that are used. And you can, the one good thing about visual management somewhere to people start learning and how this within those questions. So let me show a couple examples that might help. So here's an example that certainly answers the questions of measurements. If you notice the KPI in the middle, that's key performance indicators. So they have that. It's hard to kind of see the details, but they have daily measures, which I think are better than weekly or monthly, because you're learning quicker, and you can maybe respond sooner. On the left-hand side, they actually have some of the purpose and function elements, answering those questions, but there's a lot more missing. And one of the difficulties we have with visual management and providing examples is you can't take a picture or even a series of pictures and get them all in one place, because elements of visual management can be all around, and they can take many forms. They could be flags, and people putting flags up at their desks indicating that they're not able to keep up with work, or they found a non-standard condition or something like that. So it's very, very difficult to kind of get on one picture. So I do want to point out that a misconception is, oh, it's all about boards. So I'm showing you a lot of pictures, or several pictures of boards, but I don't want you to walk away thinking that's it. All right, it's not just about boards. So you can answer some of those questions, like this example, how are we doing, relatively frequently. It's also providing some of the purpose and activities that we perform here. So it's answering probably the first two questions and the fifth question. But standardized work wouldn't be on a board. That would be at people's desks, and maybe scheduling of work wouldn't be on the board, perhaps. It might be at people's desks. So just kind of keep that in mind. So here's a graphic rendering, because it's hard to take pictures of these things, and these are out of my third book. But it'll give you an idea. So in the upper right-hand corner, we have metrics, and that's telling us how we're doing, or in our department, or maybe the whole value stream. Again, you can do this within the value stream. Ideally, you should be doing it for the whole value stream. And it's telling us what the goals are, our actuals, on some periodic basis. And then on the upper left-hand is plan for every process. So this is actually a list of the activities that are performed, but who's responsible, and there's got some timing of when these things need to be done. And very importantly, the little dots, the shaded dots, are an indication, did I do those when I was supposed to, and did I run into a problem or not? And if there is a problem, that's a non-standard condition, and we'll talk about that in a bit. The lower left-hand corner is our team members and what their current skills are, and are they here or are they not? So a lot of office environments will use this because people are moving or traveling and such, and they thought this would be helpful, knowing who's in, who's out. So we're not looking for people that aren't here, and also what the current skills are. In that example, you see only Sue knows the benefits, which might generate an improvement opportunity. So I use this expression often: all roads of visual management should lead to continuous improvement. So there should be an aspect, an element of the visual management system somewhere that has what we're doing about improvement. And it should sort of flow. So if I'm not meeting a key metric, that should generate some sort of continuous improvement effort. And if you look in the upper right-hand corner, number 4, we've got to do some better cross-training, and therefore we generated continuous improvement project number 1 on that. And if you look in the list, that's Bob, and he's going to work on that on August 10th, and he feels he's on schedule with that. If you look at the lower left-hand corner, and that's cross-training not within the department, that's for the organization overall. This is an HR department example. I apologize for not pointing that out. But in the lower left-hand corner, as I said, only Sue knows the benefits, and maybe when she's not here, or maybe her work is piling up, there's no one else that can do that. So if you look in the continuous improvement project list, we've got an improvement opportunity there to cross-train on benefits. Sue's going to do that, and there's a date and some indication of how we're doing. Again, these 4 elements, and this is an incomplete too, right? We don't standardize work here. They should be at the desk. We don't have the schedule of work. They should be at the desk or somewhere visible. So these 4 elements in practice might not be as you visually see it here. They might be in different parts of the office or service environment. I don't want to mislead you. So, we got a couple examples of these in the accounting department, and they can all take, different versions because the activities that occur in each department or each area is different. So these should look a little different. In this case, in the upper right-hand corner, we have measures again. They're always there around. The upper left-hand corner, plan for every process. In their case, in the lower right-hand corner, if you work in an accounting department, they're very calendar-oriented. They have what they call a financial calendar, and it tells them when they should do things. And what we try to do, we try to make that visible, maybe add some other information for them to kind of understand and learn, and identify non-standard conditions like a certain activity did not get performed. So in the lower right-hand corner, you see that calendar, which typically would be electronic. We would get it out in the open and use it to see, are we performing the activities like we thought on the day we were supposed to, and if not, maybe that generates an improvement cycle. Again, all roads should lead to improvement. So there should be some element in some way of the visual management system that includes continuous improvement. What are we working on? What do we need to work on? I'm going to go over the next one just because of time, but hopefully you get the idea. It's very difficult to measure the benefits of visual management, but I kind of always respond and say, do we have to measure everything? You know, the odds are if standardized work is more visible, you're going to more likely follow it. So when you go and you audit or monitor standardized work, you're more likely to see that people are following it if it's visible. By providing a purpose, you know, the mission and vision and direction of the business, all of that, it provides a greater sense of belonging. And I think that's important. There's a human need for belonging. The next one's a double-edged sword, which maybe gives rise to the resistance. Increased accountability. Okay, so I've got what I have to work on and how I'm supposed to do it, and I'm putting myself out there. Others can see whether or not I'm meeting those expectations. So it's increased accountability. What people really are worried about there is the response if they're not following it, and that it's punitive. So I work very hard with my organizations to understand, to work on their response mode and make sure it's not a punitive, but more of focused on process. Well, why couldn't you get to that today? Maybe we've got as a group we have to work on rebalancing the workload. I think in general, what I hear from people about visual management is there's a lot less frustration and stress, and I think that's a huge thing because they have a greater sense of control over the work environment. So the next subject, moving on, is flow. I don't know, Tony, if that answered your question with some of those examples, but if you want, you can certainly email me and I can provide more. Moving on, though, that creating flow. Flow is a huge concept of lean. It's really been a huge concept in business for 100 years now. And what I have found is there are 3 approaches. One is combining activities instead of having lots of handoffs. One is continuous flow processing with multiple roles, which I'll show. And then also doing things in parallel if the work lends itself to that. And of course, you can do a combination of all these. So the way I want to discuss this is by use of value stream mapping icons. If you're not familiar with value stream mapping, that's okay. What I show here are what we call process boxes. Process 1, 2, 3. The little cyclops with the smiley face is our people icon. The inbox is showing as our queue icon, is showing where queues can form. So in the upper half, that graphic is depicting 3 processes that each have a handoff, and of course when you have a handoff you have the opportunity for a queue, and we would say, hey, what if we could combine those 3 steps and have one person do all 3? If that's possible, we could remove the opportunity for a handoff, which removes the opportunity for a queue, which means we can improve flow. The lower half of the graphic is showing, again, 3 handoffs between 3 different people. And that approach is bringing people together. Still, each person is doing most of their own thing. But the key here is balancing the workload. That's what I mean by maybe they're not doing exactly what they're doing today if the workload is in balance. But bringing them together as in a single process, single team concept. And also balancing the workload so the queues are less likely to form. That is another concept of flow. And you can do combinations of these things. I don't show the graphic of the third approach, which is concurrency, but you can just imagine if I can do these things in parallel, my overall lead time will reduce and that will improve flow to the customer. And that's kind of what we're after. So there are advantages and disadvantages to both approaches that have to be kind of flushed out to see which one is appropriate for the specific application. There are 6 steps to designing a flow system. One of the things I use as a reference is the DNA of lean, which is activities, pathways, and linkages. So we always focus on activities. In terms of do we combine, and if we do, how many people we need, and how do we balance the work, we really can't answer that unless we know what the demand rate is, or takt time, if you're familiar with that lean term, for each activity, because that would then in turn tell us what resource needs we have. And you can kind of think of that as then defining the roles and responsibilities within our area or department, or even the overall value stream, and be able to define those roles in a way that balance the work and maximize flow. Of course, then we would create standardized work for each of those roles. And certainly train people, cross-train them, because maybe people do have to help each other out from time to time, and then use the visual management systems and techniques to manage the system over time. So just very quick little case study. So here's a before picture in an office. You know, think of cubicles, ever-present cubicles, and work is moving around, electronic and or manual. People have to get up and walk around, and we want to simplify that. Bring people together. So here's all the work being performed, starting in the lower left-hand corner, going around the 4 people. And it's not just bringing them together, but it's also was balancing the workload between them and providing an opportunity for them to flex where needed. Okay, so it's not just bring them together, but really look at what they do and make sure that it's balanced. The work content is balanced to maximize flow. Alrighty. Flow can provide tremendous benefits. We can reduce lead times 50 to 90%. Process time, the actual work content, reduces 20 to 40%, because again, as we look at the work, we're going to streamline it as we create the new standardized work. And quality improvements will increase 25 to 75%. There's a lot to be said about bringing people together that need to work together in a close way. With improved flow, you find quality problems quicker. They'll be able to communicate them more directly and in a more timely manner. Therefore, the quality problems will be less. And though we get some resistance to this concept, ultimately, most people, and everything we do in Lean is what works for most people, the vast majority of people, actually increases employee satisfaction. Again, humans want to have a sense of belonging. They're social creatures. And so it's a single team concept, and most people would like that environment, though it does take time to adjust. I will grant you that. The last concept we're going to talk about before the Q&A is pull. What I want you to think of pull is a decision system. It helps us in manufacturing decide what to make and when to make it, what to buy when to buy it. In the office, it can tell me, don't do activity A, I'm going to do activity B, because that's where the real need is in a multitasking office environment. There are 2 types of pull systems, just to be complete, supermarkets and sequential pull lanes. And the sequential pull lanes, we'll just leave it as that's what's more applicable to an office and service environment. So elements of a pull system is getting visibility to the queue of work. Then you have to put limits on it. How much is too much, how much is not enough. And when those limits are hit or reached, what decisions do you want me to make? So we put rules on it. And of course, we want to execute this system through visual means that are associate managed, the people closest to the work. So here's an example. What you see here, this is actually a multi-billion-dollar leasing company. They lease everything from aircraft to helicopters, golf carts. And what we did is get all of the work, which is in multiple places, and get into one queue. It was actually hard copy paper, but you can do this with electronic. Got it all in one place. We put some rules on it, said, okay, how much is too much? And we did a visual indicator, literally a green flag. Once the work piled up, the flag, to a certain defined limit, the flag went from green to red, and that indicated very basically that demand is exceeding capacity. And what decision should we make? Not people speeding up, but we need more help. And that what this did is it triggered pre-established personnel who've already been trained in the standardized work to come and help this area. Once they got down to another limit, the flag went back to green, and these people returned to their primary objectives. This isn't haphazard. This is planned out. Who these people will be that will come and help. I just kind of throw out one more example. I don't have a picture of it, but there are pull systems going on all around you in your personal lives. If you go to a checkout line at a supermarket and it's getting very lengthy, what decision should happen? Someone should open another line. Well, we can set very clear standards. We know how long people want to work for or wait for, and how long it typically takes to process people. And then we would call for help and open up another register, maintaining a flow of the customers and their satisfaction. So if you think about, there are really pull systems going on all around you at supermarkets, restaurants, or fast food joints, that kind of thing. The benefits of pull are predictability and lead time, because what happens is the queues of work will not have this wide varying accordion effect. And it's not just queue of work, it's the time that those queues of work represent. So we're not going to get that, because the queues will only vary between the limits that we set. So we get a much more predictable lead time through a process, and if we're doing this through a whole value stream, we can get predictability through the whole value stream, which is a huge benefit to our customers and ourselves. So we get that predictability and lead time through or by controlling the WIP, the work in process. This also helps with day-to-day and even hour-to-hour management, because we're making decisions based on actual need in near real time in some cases, as opposed to waiting for some manager to make a decision of what, to move people or stop doing one task and doing something else. If we do cross-training, that's why it takes pull some time to put in place in office services, because to get the full benefits, you have to cross-train. It really adds to our flexibility, which in turn provides a more satisfying work environment, because people get to do different things, but in a controlled, organized way. So those are the key concepts. Again, we could spend hours or days on each of those, and I apologize that we don't have that time. But I do want to wrap up on what Lean Office is and is not. A lot of companies show me Lean Office and Service. Ooh, look, we're 5S'ing all our areas. And if you're not familiar with 5S, it's a methodology of getting and staying organized. And I say, great, 5S'ing is a good thing to do, but that's just a starting point. I'll ask, are you doing pull systems? And they'll show me examples where, oh, look, we're doing this with office supplies. I'll say, that's a nice example, but is that really helping with flow and customer service? And very often the answer is no. A lot of people will think that standardized work, visual management, and some of the other concepts are micromanaging. And we turn that around and say, no, we're getting control as a team over our work environment, and should require less minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour direction from a manager if we do it properly. And last, it's not about automating everything. A lot of people think Lean Office is automating everything. Let's get the IT people involved and they'll solve all our problems. What it really is changing the way work flows and how it is performed. So that means roles and responsibilities would change. It's not easy for people. It means fewer handoffs, reducing batch processing, and thinking in these terms of demand versus capacity, which I only spoke to pretty briefly. It is about using standardized work and visual management to sustain the system and its performance, but also provide a foundation for improvement. So some do's and don'ts. People really resist this, and they feel they're very different. You didn't show me any examples that I can directly apply. I'm sure some of you are thinking that way. And I can show you 1,000 photos and of different companies. But you have to realize that for every company, I showed them photos, and they had to figure out how to adapt the concepts to meet their needs. So everyone is different. Doesn't mean you can't apply the concepts. It just means you have to adapt them in a slightly different way. So hopefully that makes sense. And therefore, if you feel you're different, a lot of times people believe it just can't be done. The other thing I've learned is don't shoot for the ideal. It's about improvement, not perfection. So if you're not, sure this visual management idea that you have is going to work, try it. You'll learn from it, you'll adapt, and move on. So to that point, don't wait. So some other do's and don'ts, that means experiment. You'll learn more by doing. Be flexible. There are many correct ways of doing all of this. You have to find what works for you and your folks, which means you must involve the people. that'll get you there faster. I'm not naive enough to believe that all these ideas will just be put in place and give you improvement. We have to measure the impact. Again, I'm a Demingite, so I'm a plan, do, check, act person. You've got to go back and check. You know, when you come up with the ideas and you implement it, you must go back and check in some way. Maybe not all measurable, but in some way. Okay? So, you know, people are often very fearful of experimenting, because what if it doesn't work? So I always refer to this quote from Thomas Edison, where someone went to his lab and said, boy, you must be very disappointed. You have 1,000 failures, you know, and trying to figure out how to get a functioning light bulb. He says, no, we now know 1,000 ways not to build a light bulb. And I think that emphasizes really what Dr. Deming tried to teach, and we really emphasize these days in Lean, is this willingness to experiment and try. Right? Whether it be pull, flow, value stream management, visual management, doesn't matter. Just try it, learn from it, revise, and move on. So just to wrap up, as I do with such groups, you don't have to try any of these things. Survival is not compulsory, as Dr. Deming used to say at the end of his presentations. So I went a little bit long. So any other questions besides Tony's?
Thank you very much, Drew. All of us don't live in or work in a manufacturing environment, so this is absolutely superb. Tony did have some feedback, so I wanted to at least acknowledge Tony so that he could take him off mute. Anybody else has a question, please raise your hand and I'll pop you off mute. Tony, you're on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the photo that you had of the two flags indicating what kind of mode the team should be in was really insightful. So thanks for that. Those photos, those examples are really useful in applying the theory.
And some folks have asked about the recording being available. I am told that everybody that has access to the Lean Enterprise Division page, and all of you that register for this course have access to that, the ASQ Lean Enterprise Division homepage, you can get access to the recording there. I think that you could contact Tony if you need, to talk to him about copies of slides. His contact info is on there, and we'll just have to take about 24 hours to convert the slides, or excuse me, the recording, so that it's in a format that's available for both Mac and PC. But it will be, the full recording will be available to everyone that was signed up. Any other questions, please?
This is Drew, Dave. The only thing I would add in this last slide, the two books certainly have time to get into more detail than we had in the 1-hour webinar. So the Lean Office and Service Simplified book has entire chapters on standardized work for office and service, visual management, flow, pull, and others. And then I did refer to value stream mapping. That was my first book, The Complete Lean Enterprise. So you might find that helpful too. It's not just how to map, but it does get into some of these concepts, the key concepts, in how to redesign value streams based on the key concepts of Lean, of value, flow, pull, leveling, and so on. So you might find those helpful as well.
Greg had a question, and I just took Greg off mute. If you want to go ahead and ask it about the contrasting the value with cash flow. Greg, you're off mute. Maybe you can go ahead and answer it. Gregory asked, can you contrast value with cash flow?
Value from cash flow. Well, cash flow is the result of delivering value. So, value is in the eyes of the beholder, the customer. What are they willing to pay you for in terms of your goods and services? And then the cash flow is the result of that, right? One of the things we do look at when we talk about improving flow of a overall business is we do look at the cash cycle, which includes the payables and the receivables. And in a manufacturer, it includes the inventory. Those are the three elements of the cash cycle in a manufacturer. In a non-manufacturer, it's the payables and the receivables. So that's usually a strategic objective is to improve that, right, for understandable reasons. I don't know if that answers Greg's question or not.
Greg, I just answered you, and let me know if it did not answer your question. Anyone else? Greg doesn't have a microphone, so I have to be the interpreter.
Oh, sorry.
And a question was, could we include the slides on the Lean Division SharePoint site with the recording? So some people do have access to the Lean Division SharePoint site, and it's up to Drew whether he's going to provide those to us.
Yeah, I can absolutely provide those. Just tell me who to send it to, Dave.
Okay. And if any one of you want to contact Drew directly, I'm sure that he would welcome the opportunity to share his slides and additional knowledge. Anyone else?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so Gregory says, so is cash flow a measure of value in your opinion?
Well, I think it is, because if you don't have cash flow, someone's not buying your goods and services, they're not seeing value in what you're offering. So absolutely, it's a representation of value, right? Or a form of, I'm struggling with the right word, but yeah, if you don't have cash flow, someone's not seeing the value in the goods and services you have to offer.
Okay, and also from Gregory, accountants talk about cash flow, so just seeing it, if it is an opportunity to try to speak their language. So, I guess by addressing cash flow in a lean environment, you're at least, I guess, improving the communications between you and the accounting folks.
Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe the objective from our accounting friends is to improve cash flow, and that should be the objective of pretty much every business. So that, again, it would be a focus of our redesign efforts of the business or processes within the business. That absolutely.
Okay. Anyone else? I think it went very well. I don't see any other questions here. And I'll go ahead and close it out now. It's just about a minute after 1 o'clock Eastern Time. And I want to thank Drew very, very much for presenting today. You've got all his contact information. You're welcome to come to him directly. And this is just one of a series of webinars that's provided by the Lean Enterprise Division. We had 85 people on the call. I think 160 registered, but for some reason or another, some had to drop off. I appreciate everyone going ahead and being very, very attentive, and let Drew or I know. This is Dave Harry if you have any questions or any follow-on, and we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you, everyone, and go forth and apply.